Welcome to Morning Coffee and Mimosas. I'm Christina.
And I'm Joe.
We are a father-daughter duo. We come here Sunday mornings, but you can come here anytime you please. We banter about life, about business, and we do it over coffee and mimosas.
Good morning again.
What do you mean again?
No, every week we're here. So I said good morning again.
Oh, well.
I didn't see you since last week.
Well, good morning again.
And I'm not talking about breakfast. So we're going to move right on.
God. Okay, well, we have something more important. There is more pressing business to attend to this morning, Dad.
Is there really?
Yes.
What?
This is a very special episode.
I know it is.
Do you though?
Yes.
Do you know?
I do.
I've heard
you say it.
I've heard you tend to miss other anniversaries.
Well, not this one.
No?
No.
This is our 6th month anniversary, Dad.
No, this is our 26th episode.
And do you know how I realized it was the 6th-month anniversary?
Because 26 is half of 52.
Because I get 26 paychecks a year. Well, yeah.
Oh, very cool.
So when it's 26, I was like, wait, bi-weekly paychecks, 26, that's half a year.
Wow.
I know, it's an odd correlation, but
No, it's cool.
payday is a good day, you know?
Yeah. No, it's a milestone. And thank you for listening
Yeah,
to
so
us
to
for
our
6 months now.
listeners who have been here from the beginning, thank you
Yes.
for tuning in for 6 whole months.
I know.
And to our newer listeners that
You've
are just
got
getting
6 months to
started.
catch up on.
Yeah, we just gave you homework. But we are very excited and hope you guys
Yeah.
have been enjoying. Stay with us because we plan to give you another 6 months at
Yes.
least.
It's not ending. We're going on.
That's true.
Yeah. So this is really good. And this is the second part of a 3-part series.
Yeah, so last week, if you listened with us, and if you didn't, no big deal, but go back and listen. Last week in episode 25, we talked about simplicity in communications, and we started a series on communication, and this is our second in a 3-part. This is our second in
Christina has difficulty with.
I can't speak. This is our second in a 3-part series. So last week we talked about simplicity in communication, and we talked about how difficult that is, but how important and meaningful it can be
Right.
if you nail that one.
Right. And basically, we're not summarizing it, but just saying that the premise was know your target and how your target benefits, what your target audience, I should say, wants from the
Right.
conversation.
And as we say target audience, we didn't mean just in a corporate situation, but
No.
we mean in general. Whoever you're communicating with is your target in that moment, and figuring out what it is that they are looking for so that you can communicate so they understand.
Right.
So just a quick refresher of what we talked about last week. What we're going to be talking about today is we're going to take a step further from what we started with last week. Last week, we talked about developing who your target is that you're speaking to and some tips to more simplistically communicate. In this episode, we're going to take that a step further and talk about 3 simple ways that you can work to make sure your communications are simple.
All right. Avoiding jargon. Jargon is using professional terms or industry words and so on with people who don't know what you're talking about. Making sure that you are clearly expressing what it is you're talking about, i.e., do both parties clearly understand what is being said and how it's being conveyed?
Clarifying assumptions.
Very good. And the third is avoiding preconceived notions or ideas or a preconceived behavior on the other party's, what you expect them to perhaps say or do.
So this goes to assuming things, right?
Yes.
Assuming that somebody else, but on a different scale, right? So the first thing was assumptions of what you think you understand. The other is, or assumptions of the facts. This is more preconceived notions about how somebody else is feeling.
Right.
Projecting, if you will.
Correct. So let's start with jargon. So jargon.
What's your favorite jargon term?
There is no favorite jargon term.
There's some good jargon out there.
No, but for example, a jargon, if you are not, I'm a techie, right? So if you're not techie and you say, what laptop should I get? And I say things like, it should have 6 gigabytes of RAM and, a half a terabyte hard drive. And you're like, what the heck are you talking about, right? That's a little bit of jargon, even though it's computer stuff. I may assume you know all those things, but you don't. So I should not use those terms and define them appropriately. Another use of jargon, you're in sales. You may be talking about your sales funnel, and so you won't say sales. You must my funnel. Lots of leads in the funnel. If I'm not in sales, I don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
I'm in the credit union industry, and we have what are called in order to become a member, you have to belong or work for a company that's a select employer group, but we don't say that. We say segs, so we're seg based. If you don't know what I'm talking about,
right, then
you don't know what I'm talking about. That's jargon. Mm-hmm. Within the industry, you can use jargon. That's perfectly fine if we all know what we're talking about. But it's not when you're talking to someone outside of that. And what happens is when you use a term that somebody doesn't understand and you continue talking, the natural reaction is for the person to try to figure out what that means.
Yep.
So now they're no longer hearing anything coming from you at all.
Because now they're like, shit, I don't know something I'm supposed to know. And now I'm going to rack my brain or start.
Yeah, you're trying to put it together. You're trying to, figure it out. But the point is they're just not hearing you. So they're not getting your message anymore.
Well, and I think another thing, Dad, you said that it's okay within an industry to use jargon. And I think that's okay. But I've even seen it within an industry or within a company where most people in the company or most people in the industry know and get a term, but not everybody.
Well, you're right. And it goes back to knowing your target. Who are you talking to? Well, can you make a reasonable assumption they understand it, or ask them?
Or do you just eliminate jargon and try and at least speak clearly and define what you're actually trying to say?
Correct. But just think about this. If 2 programmers are talking, if 2 salespeople are talking, you follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
It wouldn't make sense.
But I'll give an example. Like in my company, I remember, and this is, where I think it's an industry term, right? So at our company, and I think in a lot of companies, we refer to white space as, as you're selling and you may talk to somebody who's a net new customer, that's something else. But if we're looking at selling to existing customers and selling them something new, that's a white space sale.
Oh, see, I didn't know that. Cool.
So I would assume if I was talking to you and telling you about what I do, I'd be like, our team focuses on net new and we focus on existing white space selling. You probably wouldn't know what I was saying.
I wouldn't.
And at one point in time, I would have assumptively thought that everybody refers to white space as that. Even in the sales profession and in our industry, when a couple of different companies came together, there were certain sales individuals that didn't know what white space meant. And apparently white space, it was like, they were like, oh, well, we call that black space because that's an existing customer. So anyway, maybe it's not a very good example.
No, it's an excellent example.
But, white space, we look at, okay, it's everything that you don't do with a customer that you already have. So that's white space. But that was not something that was known across the board, but it was something that we used so easily that it just jargon. Seemed like everybody knows what it is.
And that's it. That's jargon.
So that is jargon. And sometimes you are so familiar with jargon that you don't even realize that it's jargon.
Right. And that's why we bring it up, because it is so ingrained in us, because you're speaking to your fellow employees and so on who all know what you're talking about. But then when you're not, whoever you're talking to stops at that point and is trying to figure out what that means.
And that means that anything that you say after you throw out something that's jargon, they basically, it's like...
They didn't get it.
They got nothing.
Right.
Because they completely stopped and shut down after you said something that they were like, hold on.
So link it back to last week's episode with, we talked about simplifying and having to know your target, and you're determining what to leave in and what to leave out, but you left in the gems. That's perfect. You left it in. But you'll use jargon.
Yeah.
gems got lost because your prospect or your person you're trying to impress or your boss, whoever you're talking to, didn't get it.
And it would be the assumption that somebody's going to ask every time they don't know what something means is a wrong one.
Correct.
Because most of the time people don't ask because they don't want to feel stupid.
I don't want to be stupid. I'm like, I'm wondering why I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, especially when somebody says something that's like, well, of course, you know, you just throw it in there like it's part of, you're like, oh, shoot. Okay, I guess I would have failed the SATs tomorrow.
Yeah.
Huh? I didn't know that word.
I had no idea. No, it's exactly right. It's exactly right. So that's why jargon is so important to avoid and know who to avoid it with. And if you're not sure, like with that white space example, like you merged with another company and you feel that let's say I was a salesperson from the other company, you feel I should know that, just ask.
Yep.
You know, just say, we're very important. We're focusing on white space. Do you follow what I mean? And then
clarify though, because there's also words that are jargon that are different jargon
better
to
to
different.
define it.
Yeah.
Just define it. You don't even have to ask. You're right.
Yeah. What we mean by white space is
correct.
X. Because I think there are words that they mean something different in different industries or different companies, right?
I taught presentation skills, and I would talk about, I'd be well prepared and I'm giving a talk, and then my brain, I get a whiteout. I would talk about like white space in my brain. Like I'm looking at the audience and I don't know what to say. Nothing is coming in. The teleprompter went blank, and I don't have a teleprompter. The teleprompter in my brain.
Right.
And I used to call it.
Does that happen more to you now as you're, getting on in the years, or is it pretty much about the same?
This may be the last episode that I share with her.
6 months and we're done. We're going to go to white space for episode 27.
But you can see it's a totally different industry, totally different expression, totally, whatever. So excellent. So that's jargon. The next one, you phrased it better than I did. What was number 2?
I have a little bit,
less
wear on the tires, if you will. Just kidding. So the next one is clarify assumptions.
Very good.
And that one is important because there are sometimes, think about an example where you are communicating with another individual and you're communicating on a topic, but maybe I have a certain assumption about what the facts are, and you have a different assumption about what the facts are. So developing or clarifying, hey, Joe, we could use the white space example, continue down the line with that. Hey, Joe, we're going to need to make a major effort in our white space expansion. To be clear, I'm talking about the growth within our current business segment for cross-selling into other areas. What do you think we should be doing here? So making sure that, or, assumptions, I don't know if that makes any sense. Maybe you have a better example because you do have more experience, with the extra years.
Yeah, with the worn tires that I have. Yeah, wise guy. No, a good example happened to me recently in explaining a discrepancy in a file. And I was talking to somebody else about this file, a database file. And I was assuming, I know we all know what assuming happens, but I assume.
Let's not make assumptions.
Right?
Assuming makes an ass out of you and me.
There you go.
As they tend to say.
That's right. But I assumed that the person was comparing this one set of data to an original file. And when I got the answer from the other person, and that person is telling me about the differences in the file, and I'm responding, how could there be differences in this file versus another file since it should be the same thing? Like I didn't, and I'm not going to go into why, but
yeah, please don't.
Whereas the other person,
please don't.
The other person was comparing that file to a different database because I had asked, do these numbers look correct? But I didn't clarify against what criteria it should be, if you're following.
That's a better example, yeah.
All right. So I just assumed one thing, the other party assumed, and we were both correct. My assumption was correct. His assumption was correct. But I wasn't talking about what he was talking about, and he wasn't talking about what I was talking
Well, his review of the data was correct. Your review of the data was correct, but it didn't make sense what he was sharing with you because you were both looking at two different comparisons.
Right. I was assuming a point of reference A, let's say, and he was assuming point of reference B.
Right.
And only when finally it was like, I said, I don't understand. And then, he said, this is what I'm comparing it against. What you don't understand. And then I'm like, oh God, I see what's happening. I'm comparing it against this. And then we both were like, oh my God, correct.
But you look at the time that was wasted and everything. If you guys had up front, established what is the criteria that you need to compare.
Correct. And I take that on myself because I was the one who made the query to him. So I should have been very clear about what it was I was
looking for the comparison to be made on.
I made an assumption. And that's what I'm talking about. Do both parties clearly understand? The second thing about that is people don't always understand exactly what it is you say word-wise. Now, that was a database file, right? So that
I actually didn't understand what you were saying word-wise there.
No, but we all interpret things differently. Not even phrases, not jargon, just interpret things differently. You may not understand me clearly because maybe I wasn't clear in what I said. Or the other side is people don't really listen very well. So I could be 100% clear. You just weren't paying attention to all of it. You got about 80% of what I said and figured out the rest, or thought you did.
Assumed the rest.
Correct. You follow?
Yeah.
So it's not even technical stuff. It's just, a simple phrase or something that you may not have, completely gotten. So it's very important in our communications. Again, we're trying to be simple and we want to come across and be direct and to the point. But sometimes repetition is needed and asking a clarifying question.
Yeah.
So I say something to you and you go, I got it.
Well, I think that's part of the read back, right?
Yeah, especially
Ask
when
for a read back.
When you're asking someone to do something. Correct. You say, Christina, would you go do ABC? And you say, okay. And then I just have to say, all right, before you go, so what are you doing for,
I want to make sure that we're aligned on the understanding of what has to happen next.
It's so often you'll hear when you ask the question back, you'll hear, yeah, no, I got, what was the third thing you wanted me to do?
Well, even I think that's also important, and when you're hearing something from somebody, like I sometimes like to say, let me just restate this back to you to make sure that I'm understanding what you're saying properly. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a really good practice
that's a great thing. Yes.
Because sometimes you take some quick notes down, right? Mm-hmm. And as people are talking, you're picking up the things that you feel are important.
Right.
You read it back to them or repeat it back to them. And they say, yeah, that's pretty close, but you missed this piece.
Right.
And then that's something that's important to them that you didn't capture in your
correct
skimming of what they shared.
That's it. So on both parts, I need to try to make sure you understand it. You could ask clarifying questions back and so on. And then the final piece is avoiding preconceived notions. And that comes into, let's say you and I are a little testy, like maybe I'm...
You mean like when I told you to wear on the tires?
Yeah, exactly. So like, I set this thing up and I'm like, she's going to criticize me or whatever. If I have a preconceived notion about what you're going to do, I may
you expect me to
act a certain way, like try to head it off, insult myself before you do. But think about it, we're all human. So you may be someone who intimidates me. You may be somebody who I don't care for. Vice versa. It doesn't, you know what I'm saying? So,
or you may have had a bad experience with me where right. I was in a certain head place and I bit your head off over something not that big of a deal. And now you're expecting to dodge
the
grenades.
Same behavior, even though you're not even thinking about that anymore.
Exactly.
Because that just went off, And I know I had a boss once years ago, and he was the type that would blow up in a heartbeat. He had anger management issues, but he would blow up and then forget about it, and I'll never forget this. One day I happened to walk in. He was mad about something that had nothing to do with me, and I walk in, but I was the first person that And he started just like yelling at me. And, you know, it was just like, he was my boss. But I remember I just sat down and I started working and I was stewing because it's hard for me to forget that.
Yeah.
But he blew up and then was done. And it was like 2 hours later, I don't even want to look at him.
You were holding on to it and he was
holding
like,
on to it, and he came by. That's exactly what happened. He was like, you good for lunch today? And I'm thinking, yeah. And I went to lunch because he's my boss, but I had a preconceived notion that he's going to yell at me again or something.
So you picked something like,
but everything was fine.
You picked a real quick lunch. You're like, I don't really want to have to.
Yeah. But that's my point. You know, like we do that. And then I'm anticipating a reaction from you that I'm not going to get.
Well, and I think that sometimes happens too, you know, people that maybe suffer from anxiety or sometimes our minds wander and create issues that don't exist.
Yeah, exactly. That's
so
it.
you could think about, I think that goes back to something we've talked about in the past, which is not projecting your own feelings on a situation, because just because you would feel a certain way about something doesn't mean another person, you know, kind of putting yourself in someone else's shoes and being empathetic of their situation. Just because you may react a certain way to something doesn't mean they would. And I think the other thing is just, you know, sometimes our minds spin out and wander and create issues that don't exist.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you may create all those issues and then you start to kind of like project that. And you may project negativity and things like that in your communication because you're creating an issue that's not actually there.
Right. Right. That's it. And you think about all the barriers we have in communication, you know, these three basic areas, if you can kind of cover these, I think you're pretty much home free or just about. So,
yeah. And then,
nice.
Yeah. So, you know, we go back to last week, you know, making sure you've got your target audience locked in and understanding what they care about. And then, you know, remember these three things to simplify your own communications. So eliminate the jargon, identify the jargon, because sometimes it's hard to even know what is jargon.
Right.
Clarify the assumptions ahead of time, and then avoid preconceived notions. Don't create issues that don't exist.
Right. Beautiful. Nice summary.
Thanks, Dad.
1, 2, 3.
3 is a lot easier than, I think we've done 6 in the past. That gets a little bit,
I know.
that gets a little crazy.
It's all right. We'll get there.
So Dad, you know, next time, I don't know, I'll try and eliminate my assumptions that the potatoes will be fresh every morning and when I come for this.
Well, we were celebrating, you know, 6 months.
We are celebrating 6 months. Yeah. So if you can't tell, there's been more mimosas poured today than usual. But it's been a lot of fun. Anyway, Dad, no assumption here, but I think we are both very excited for the next 6 months.
Absolutely.
Hopefully, listeners, you will hang with us and be as excited as we are. And again, as always, if there's a topic you want to hear about, something we might have missed, send us a note. We want to hear from you. Leave a review. Share with a friend.
And share with a friend. Yes, exactly.
We appreciate it.
All right. Wherever you are, whatever your story, thanks for spending time with us this morning. Now, go and make a difference in your world.
Dad, when do you want to exchange gifts? You didn't get me anything?
I didn't get you anything. Ooh.
This is some bullshit. I'll take jewelry. Is this the podcast anniversary?
No,
get
jewelry's
jewelry?
not for 6 months.
Damn it.
Take care, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.